Right now on the Power Chord Hour, we're talking to our guest, Chris Swinney, who currently hosts the That One Time on Tour podcast, where he talks to various musicians all about touring and music. And so far, he's talked to members of Black Flag, The Offspring, Rise Against, The Descendants, and many, many more. A really impressive list there. And on top of the podcast, Chris has also played guitar in the Ataris and also played in the band Brazil. Chris, how are you today?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks a lot for having me on the show. I appreciate it.
Oh, no, I've been really excited. I'm a big fan of the podcast. And I mean, just to get started on that, you've been doing that now for almost a year. What got you started to do that one time on tour?
Well, I've I've always been a fan of podcasts. I like talk radio a lot, but it always seemed like it was super political. And I mean, I'm sort of a political guy, but I just got sick of how divisive it was. And when I found out about podcasts, I mean, I always kind of knew what they were, but I never gave them a chance. And I started listening to this one podcast called How Did This Get Made? It's a comedy podcast about bad movies. And I really liked it and thought it was cool. And then through that, I found that my buddy Shane from Silverstein had a podcast called Lead Singer Syndrome. And a friend of mine, Dewey Halpus, that used to be in Anatomy of a Ghost, he had one called Pure Pleasure. And I started finding all these really cool music-based podcasts. And after listening for about 6 to 8 months, my wife kind of convinced me, like, hey, you know a lot of people, why don't you do one? So I just kind of on a whim tried it. I had some recording equipment and I booked my first guest. It's one of my best friends in my entire life, Joel Green. He used to play bass for Emery, and he said he'd do it. And I did a little interview with him and put it together. And my buddies, this band called the Travoltas from Amsterdam, they let me use their song One for the Road as my theme song. And after that, it was kind of off to the races. And I started getting sponsors and started getting like all kinds of ads, and it just kind of took off. It kind of blew me away. Like within the first month, I was already close to 8,000 plays.
Oh,
So,
wow. That's
yeah.
that's really impressive. I mean, you haven't even hit the year mark yet, right?
No, I haven't hit the year mark yet, and it's pretty insane, man. And now like people are actually publicists are hitting me up and wanting me to put their people on the show. Like I'm still kind of trying to exhaust my little digital Rolodex of people that I knew or that I've toured with, but yeah, it's kind of crazy that I'm actually getting people now that, hey, can we be on the show? And I don't even really know who they are. Like I know their band, but we didn't have a connection.
Obviously, being in bands prior to this, I'm sure you've had your fair share of interviews. Was it weird though going to the other side and then interviewing people? Was that weird at all?
I thought it would be weird at the beginning, but I've had a lot of really good advice from Shane and from Dewey and the different people that I know in the podcasting world, where I always want it to be more conversational and less like, I mean, when you're in a band that has any type of success, you end up doing all these interviews and they really get old and stale. And the thing that I really like about my show, everyone that I've had on my show, I've been a fan of as well. Not even like did I know them or I have something in common with them, but I'm also a fan. So I try to ask questions that maybe a fan would ask, as opposed to like, hey, how's the new record doing? Like I don't normally do that. And I've had a lot of feedback from people that like the show that say it's kind of like being a fly on the wall and just two guys talking about stuff they enjoy. And that's how I like it. So the transition hasn't been as bad as you would think it would be.
And then, obviously the biggest subject on the show is about touring. How old were you when you went on your first tour?
My first actual tour, I was 17, and it was only like a 4-day tour. But it's pretty funny. I was in a band called Chronic Chaos in high school, and we were kind of this metal type punk kind of deal. Imagine like a Wilhelm Scream, but less good. And
All right.
it was the infancy of the internet. I mean, stuff was around, but it wasn't like it is now. And we had an offer to go play these shows in Vermont for a weekend. And I lived in Indiana. Vermont was like 17 hours away, but when you're that young and you get that offer, it was like $100 a show. It was stupid. But my parents were always super, super supportive, and it was their anniversary weekend, and they'd never been to New England up in that area. So my dad just said, hey, we're going to borrow your grandma's van and we're going to put all your equipment in there and we're all going to go up to Vermont for a long weekend and we're going to sell your merch for you.
Oh, that's awesome.
So my first tour was my band, the other three guys, me, my sister, who's 3 years younger than me, who at the time I think was in 8th grade, And then my mom and dad and we all just went to Vermont, and my mom and dad got us a hotel room, and we played the shows, and we made a couple $100 and sold all of our merch, and then we drove 17 hours home.
What that's quite a that's a neat first tour story though.
No, it really kind of whet my appetite for it as well, because if my parents hadn't been as supportive as they were, it would have never happened. And the next time we really left the state was like a year later. We did like a little Midwest run that I booked. But that first tour, like leaving the state and driving that far away and meeting new people in the music scene that liked our band and selling all of our t-shirts, like it was amazing to have that family support. And my parents were always like, if you want to do something in music, it's just as valuable as doing something as being a doctor or being a teacher. Like, music is your thing, so why would we ever squash that? And if I didn't have parents that supportive, I don't think I would have ever had any success at all.
That's really neat. Yeah, I mean, including from the get-go, from that, to have such a supportive. That's awesome that they were your, I mean, basically merch people. They went out and sold your merch for you. That's very supportive. That's so that's the first time you went to the East Coast then? Like, had you ever really left Indiana before you started touring?
I mean, I had done some vacations and stuff down south and out west, and I'd been to Canada a couple of times with my father. My dad was a quality engineer at a car company, like a car factory, and we would have to go up to Detroit and Windsor and Toronto and stuff, and I'd always go on business trips with him. But that was the first time that we'd really kind of on a whim just gone and done something crazy like that. Yeah, I'd never left the state for playing music before.
So, I mean, kind of getting back to the show, you're up to like 40 episodes now. You have a really impressive group of guests. I mean, I always like seeing who you have coming up. You always get really good people. Has there been anyone that you've interviewed yet that you were like really nervous about interviewing? Because you've had some pretty big names, like within like the music industry. You've had some pretty big gets.
Well, I'll tell you, this last one, I had Ricky Rocket, the drummer from Poison. I wouldn't say I was super nervous to do it, but I wasn't sure how it was going to go, because mostly I've had punk and kind of underground artists on my show, and even ones that I'm huge fans of, like Thrice is one of my favorite bands of all time. But Eddie, their bass player that was on my show, like I know Eddie. Like when I was in the Ataris, we did Warped Tour with Thrice. Like it's weird to be such a fan of someone that you're friends with, and then you kind of have to wear that other shoe of like making sure you're asking them the right questions. But having my last two episodes, I had Matt Pinfield, who used to be the host of 120 Minutes on MTV. He's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That was the one I was the most nervous about.
Oh, and I gotta say too, I was probably most jealous of that, because he's like, I would love to have him on. He's like one of my heroes in broadcasting.
Well, he was the nicest guy in the world, and even remembered, like off when we weren't recording for the show, he remembered the time that we met in LA. And he, told on the show about how he was championing to get Columbia to sign the Ataris back when we became available. Like, he was the most down to earth, like nicest guy. And right off the bat, he made me feel at ease. I was fanboying out a little bit, and I know he could tell that. So he just, I don't know. He made it easy to talk to him. And now we talk all the time. And like, he knows how much I love Alice in Chains, and he sent me, actually Alice in Chains and Rancid, and he's been presented platinum records from both of those bands for his help. And the other day he texted me pictures of his platinum records. He said, "Have a good day, man. Check this out."
That's like, so cool.
I've made a lot of friends through this podcast. I mean, even the Ricky Rocket episode, I wasn't sure how it was going to go, because I've never had anybody from that music genre on the show, and someone that sold that many records and been, like Poison was a massive band. And he could not have been nicer. And we chatted after the show on the phone for a while. And the other day he texted me and said, "Hey, stay cool, stay warm out there in Indiana. I know how cold it's going to get." Like, I've made a lot of friends through the show, and that's what I love about it as well. I have two small children, and I'm not able to tour like I used to tour. And this show kind of lets me relive my past, as well as just still feel connected to the music scene, which for a while I felt very disconnected.
And then kind of going to your touring days, how did you end up joining the Ataris?
That's a really funny story. I always kind of knew Chris Rowe, the singer. We come from, there's two towns that are very, very close together in Indiana. And growing up, like that first band, Chronic Chaos, we played with the Ataris when they were first starting out. And there was just always this kind of connection. We always kind of knew of each other. And I had a band going with Joel from Emory, actually, after he quit Emory, called the Widow Jenkins. and it was kind of this more metallic kind of hardcore band. And we were getting ready to sign to Victory. We had a showcase at Victory Records, and the day we were leaving to go to Chicago to play the showcase, our singer quit.
Oh, geez.
So that day I hit Chris Rowe up because the Ataris hadn't done anything for a long time. And I said, hey, man, do you want to sing for my band? We're getting ready to sign to Victory. And he was like, I wouldn't mind doing that. But he said, I'm also trying to get the Ataris kind of rebooted. Do you want to be in the Ataris? And I'm like, hell yeah. And within 3 weeks, I was in Vegas playing the Rio in front of like 7,000 people. So,
oh, wow.
It went very, very quickly. And we did all the demos for all the new stuff that's been coming out. We did at my home studio, and it kind of went from 0 to 60 in 1 second. Like one day I was not signing to Victory because my band was falling apart, and the next day I was flying to South Africa to play with the Ataris. It was insane.
That's awesome. In a way, I mean, you hate to say that maybe it worked out better, but I mean, given the track record of Victory, maybe it was good. Maybe it was good that you weren't in a band that got signed to Victory in the long run.
I mean, I've got a lot of friends, like Tucker from Thursday was on the show, and Jack from Bayside, and a lot of my friends that have been on the show that have had some issues with, even Eddie from Taking Back Sunday. They all have their stories about Victory, and some of their stories are worse than others. But I think it all worked out because being able to play with the Ataris, I was able to make a lot of friends in the industry. And now that I'm no longer in the Ataris, and who knows, I might play with them again. Chris and I kind of leave it open-ended. He's got other guys playing right now, but in the future, if it makes sense, I might go do some tours or something. But it helped a lot. And there is that small amount of, name recognition. That's actually helped the podcast out quite a bit. I get good guests, but I also think that small amount of name recognition might let people check my show out before maybe they check out someone that didn't have that name recognition. And that is a blessing and a curse. You know what I mean?
When you were in the Ataris, when you were playing with them, I was just wondering, because I know it was a few years after Welcome the Night. I mean, I love that record, but I know it's a polarizing record. At that point, were you guys playing like anything live off that? Because I do love that record, and I've never heard anything off it live.
I will say that I think there were a couple times somewhere not in the States that we played Not Capable of Love, or we at least attempted to do it. But the majority of the stuff that we were playing was, the first record all the way through So Long Astoria. So, I love Welcome the Night as well. But a lot of those songs, it was a polarizing record, and a lot of people didn't like it, and a lot of people did. And the one thing that Chris and I always talked about was that, you put out So Long Astoria, and then you wait 4 to 5 years to put out, Welcome the Night, and it's very different, and there's cello on it, and it's just more spacey and kind of, more mature, I would say. It's still
Absolutely.
the Ataris. It's still rocking, but a lot of those people that were so into So Long Astoria grew up, graduated, had kids, went to college, and maybe they're not ready for Welcome the Night. They're more ready for like So Long Astoria Part 2. I always relate it back to the metal genre. You've got Metallica, who every time they put out a record, it's very polarizing because it never sounds like the same record. And then you've got Slayer, who's put out the same record their entire career. So, and there's pros and cons of both, but Chris is a guy, and we've had so many conversations about it. He never wanted to do the same thing. He never wanted to get pigeonholed. And in interviews when I used to be in the band, they always would ask us, this new record that's still, kind of like Chinese Democracy from Guns N' Roses, it still hasn't really come out yet. A lot of those songs kind of bridge the gap. They're equal parts So Long Astoria, equal parts Welcome the Night. And I think that if all of those songs ever do see the light of day, or the band signs a new deal, I think people are going to be very, very pleasantly surprised, because it's the missing link between the two records.
Oh, that would be really neat to hear. I'm kind of the party too, where it's like, I feel like had that album not come out under the Ataris name, put it under anything else, people would have loved it, because that album.
We talked about that many times. Like Chris and I, in the van at 3:00 in the morning, we'd always be like, man, if that record would have just been maybe like a Chris Rose solo record, or if that record would have been just some other name, I think it would, and I think that record also in 10, 20 years from now, people are going to find it and they're going to realize how great it is.
I hope you're right. I mean, even on the production end, it's a big rock record in a lot of
Oh yeah,
ways. Like people really like,
it was ahead of its time because that's kind of, all the bands that are still doing that genre nowadays. That's what they sound like, and that's what the production sounds like. And you got to remember that record came out in '07.
oh wow, yeah, that really was. I'm forgetting that it's 12 years old. Like that really was. When you
Yeah,
say ahead of its time, it was really ahead of its time.
and that's the thing. I think it was so far ahead of its time, and it was so far removed from maybe what people expected after so long Astoria blew up and did so well, is that there needed to be a gap. There needed to be a bridge between the two records. And some of the songs that Chris has released that, are on the new record, he's been doing like an EP here and there, a single here and there. Those songs are kind of bridging the gap. And if all the songs see the light of day, everybody will understand. It should have been like the bridge between the two records.
Well, that's really cool. Do you like one more tour story? You got anything from the Ataris that like stands out?
You just mean like a tour story?
Just anything, yeah. While like during your time in the Ataris, maybe like I know you did Warp Tour with them. Like maybe a good Warp story.
Okay, well, Warp Tour was pretty awesome, and I'll tell you, we were on the main stage. And one thing I'll tell you about myself over the years of playing, I've been in a lot of signed bands. Brazil, we were on Fearless. I played in Undermined on Kung Fu. Played with this band called The Reason on Warner Brothers up in Canada. And over the years, my bands and bands that I toured with and played with, until I was with the Ataris and playing the main stage, I've played on every stage on that tour, all the way from the baby stage up to the main stage. So I was always very, I don't know, a lot of people let things go to their heads, but when I was in the Ataris, I didn't build their fan base. I joined the band after they had a gold record, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it was like we were on the main stage, and everybody on the main stage was very, very cool. It was Under Oath and No Effects and Bad Religion and Thrice, and all of those people were super, super nice, but they didn't seem to like go hang out at the merch table or hang out with the kids. And no, I'm not saying anything bad about them. They've been doing it forever, but every chance that I got, I would go meet the kids or go down to the merch table. And we kind of got Chris to do that as well, because I wouldn't say he's jaded, but he's been doing it for a really long time. And I think he found happiness again in that, in being able to connect with the kids on that level. So that Warped Tour back in 2009 was an insane tour. I mean, hanging out and playing poker with different bands and just, I don't know, the whole thing. I'm trying to think of an actual story. The whole thing's kind of a blur. It was just a whirlwind because I got to play. Oh, I got a story. I'll tell you. Before I tell the story, though, it was a whirlwind because I got to play with some of my favorite bands. Like, I'd get done playing, and then I wouldn't leave the stage. I would just stand to the side and watch No Effects. I mean, who gets to do that?
That is pretty neat. To just stand up there and watch No Effects any day that you want. I think I'm going to watch No Effects today. I think I'll watch Bad Religion later. Yeah, that is pretty cool.
Well, I remember one day we played first because on Warped Tour there's no rock stars. Like, they'll tell you, oh, you guys are playing at noon today. So we got up there, we played, and then I didn't leave the stage all day because it was No Effects, Bad Religion, Thrice, Under Oath. I mean, I never left the stage.
Yeah, that's a killer year. That's a killer lineup there.
It was an insane year. But okay, so the story, episode 2 of my podcast, I talked to Gavin Smith, who was our tour manager for Warped Tour. And it was funny because he would always go down. On that Warped Tour, we didn't have a bus. We were trying to save some money. We were actually the only band on the main stage that wasn't in a bus. So we went down, and we'd always get a hotel when we would leave. We'd drive down the night before, after the barbecue and everything, and we'd get a hotel. And the next morning, Gavin would let us sleep, and he would go down to the venue and advance the show, find out when we're playing, if we had to get meal tickets for catering, whatever. And he texts me. I was the only one awake. He texts me, goes, "You guys are playing at noon." And at this point, it was like 11:30.
Oh no!
So he comes back to get us, and in the van, and this is in Oakland, like outside of San Francisco. So we're heading back. We get stuck in crazy traffic. It's literally 5 minutes till we're supposed to play, and we're stuck in traffic, but we can see the venue. And I was like, Gavin, you're just gonna have to stay here and wait until you get out of traffic. and we're going to make a run for it. So we all got out of the van with our guitars and just ran. And the security let us right through because they knew we were a band because we had all our gear. And we got on stage with like 30 seconds to spare. We didn't get a sound check, but it was fine because we just wanted to play. And we played our half-hour to 45-minute set. And like 10 minutes after we were done and we were backstage kind of hanging out, Gavin showed up. He had just parked the van. So we would have missed our entire set.
Oh, wow.
And on Warped Tour, you don't get any do-overs, man.
Yeah, I can't.
I mean, you miss your set, you know?
Wow, no, that's a good story, and I can't imagine. I imagine it was quite warm as you're running up there in California in the summertime.
Well, yeah, and it was the fact that we couldn't we made it. Let's chill for a second, drink of water. It's like the guy, on the PA is like, okay, go, and we weren't even plugged in yet.
Oh, geez.
So our techs were all there and ready to go. So as soon as they saw us, like they grabbed the cables, and it was insane. It was the most stressful day of Warped Tour, I'll say that.
That sounds like it. The fact you got to run there and you got about 5 seconds to go.
And when I say that we could see the stage, like it wasn't like we were 100 feet away. We were a good mile and a half from the stage. We actually got out, ran down the freeway to get to the venue, like the big outdoor place.
Oh, Jesus.
It must have looked pretty funny from the outside.
Yeah, guys running down the road with guitars in their hands.
Yeah, it was pretty awesome, man. But I miss those days quite a bit.
How about on the podcast? I mean, what dream guests? Who would you like to have on here in the future?
Well, one of my dream guests I have spoken to, and he has declined at the moment, but said there's always a chance. I want Henry Rollins really bad.
Oh, that would be great.
He has turned me down 3 times, but Hank's a good guy, and he always was very nice to me and my friends in the band, because on Boys of Summer, Chris said Black Flag sticker instead of Deadhead sticker. So there was always that connection, like, oh, you guys are the ones that said Black Flag sticker. So he's always been very, very polite and nice to me. And I think eventually he may do it, but he's such a busy guy and he doesn't have to do it. I mean, like, he's not trying to promote himself. It's Henry Rollins. He can do anything he wants. I also have, this might be kind of weird to most people, but one of my favorite bands of all time is a band called Silverchair. And I would really, really like to have Daniel Johns or any of the guys from Silverchair on the show. I've spoken to Chris, their drummer, I think, or maybe I talked to their bass player, Ben, I can't remember. And they have said possibly in the future, but no commitment as of yet. The only other guy that I'm really, really excited to, and it might happen because I have spoken to his people, is Jerry Cantrell from Alice in Chains.
Oh, that would be a really cool guest as well.
And those people, like, it's amazing how, like, receptive these people are. Like, those are my dream guests, but I have spoken to, if not the actual person, their people, and they've never just said no.
Yeah, that's nice, or even just getting a response, because sometimes you just don't get anything. So yeah. I kind of respect that, including a guy like Henry Rollins. Like you said, he's Henry Rollins. He doesn't really need to do anything. So it's like he could easily just blow people off,
Yeah, but he's so, dude, I've been inviting him to Christmas with my family for the last 7 years.
Oh, nice.
Like, I'll email him and go, hey, Henry, it's Chris. Remember me? The Black Flag sticker? Ha, ha, ha. Do you want to come to Christmas at my mom's house? And he always says, like, oh, sorry, man, I got to decline. I'll be in Asia or something.
The fact that he answers, though.
Oh, he answers everybody, man. Like, he is the person that people should look up to as far as fame and popularity or whatever you want to say. He never, even though he's not, like, probably feeling like doing it all the time, he always takes pictures with people. He always signs stuff. He'll email you back. He's literally, he does it the right way. And I've always tried to, even with the small amount of success that I've had in my life, I've always tried to be like Henry. Because you never know. Like, there are people that I met when I was in the Ataris who were just fans that would come to the shows, and I still have long-lasting relationships with them. There's some guys in Tennessee and some guys overseas in Spain and in places that I still talk to on a weekly basis. I have a buddy from England that I got to know from being in the Ataris who doesn't play music at all. He's just a fan, and he's sent my son like British flags and postcards just because, I don't know, I like that aspect of music and the podcast. I love making friends, and I love, like, I'm not better than anybody else. And the people on my show, even if they've sold 60 million records, they're not better than anybody else either. And that's why I like the podcast realm. I like how it's just a conversation, and it really makes me feel like I did when I was touring and I was meeting people, because that's the best part of being in a band. It's not money or fame or girls. It's meeting people and connecting with people on a even level.
That's really cool. That's I've never personally toured, but I've traveled cross country a few times in my car, and that's my favorite thing, is meeting people in just random places and kind of going.
Yeah.
You know, like most people don't have those chances. Like you're saying, you've made these friends through shows and doing the podcast, and it's such an unconventional way to meet people that sometimes it's surreal to go, oh, well, I'm talking to that person because I play guitar in a band or because I do this podcast. Like, that's really cool.
Well, dude, I'll give you a little story to kind of go along with that. So I'm a big traveler. I've been to 65 countries. And some of them with the band, some of them just on vacation, like, just going around traveling. My biggest passion in my life, beneath music and my wife and my kids, is traveling.
Nice.
And one thing that's really cool, when I was in the Ataris or I was in Brazil or any band I've ever been in, if someone added me on social media, whether it be Facebook, MySpace, whatever, I would always approve them, no matter where they were from or if I've ever met them before. And I didn't really know why I was doing that. I just wanted to be that guy that, yeah, you can be my friend, whatever. And then after I left the band, I spent a few years just sort of traveling. Like, I went to South America, I went to Europe, I went all over the place. And I would always put up a status like, hey, I'm going to be in Peru for the next 10 days. Anybody I know in Peru want to hang out and show me around? And literally people that I met on social media that liked the bands I was in have basically been my tour guides, and I've stayed at their houses and they've bought me dinner. Their parents have cooked me dinner when I was in the Czech Republic. Like, insane stuff like that. I almost started this Rolodex of people I knew all over the world, so no matter where I go, I have a friend.
That's awesome. That's the way to do it. That's I don't know, I think you're doing it right, including in this industry, including when you're doing a show where you talk to people, meeting people, connecting with them and stuff. It makes it easier. It makes it more conversational and everything too, I think. It kind of shows, like you were saying, the people ahead of time, you've made these friends, and it kind of it kind of shows when you interview them, because it does feel more like a conversation, and it seems like you've gotten it through doing that, through the traveling and whatnot.
Well, I've had some guests of the show that maybe I didn't know as well that before we start recording, they'll say, like, so you're just going to ask me a couple questions, like, what's this all about? And I'm like, we're just going to talk for like an hour. And they kind of act strange at the beginning, like, we're just going to talk. And I'm like, yeah. I said, I have some questions. I have notes. I have a chronological timeline of your career. We're going to talk about stuff. But this isn't like an interview. It's just me and you shooting the shit until the hour hits, and then people are going to get bored, so we're going to stop.
With podcasts, it is what I love. I mean, I enjoy doing radio, but the thing that podcasts have is that free flow that you don't have to worry about someone just tuning in and worry about like missing something. You're there from the get-go, and the best ones are just ones where it sounds like it's a conversation. It's not like broken up in segments or things like that. It's just, here we go. We're going to talk and we're going to see where this goes. Let's see what we can get at, let's see what we talk about.
I do limited editing. Like, I'll process stuff to make the spoken word stuff sound a little bit better through speakers. But as far as editing goes, unless it's a story that the person tells me after, hey, I don't really want that on the podcast. And that's never happened. I always give them that option, but that's never happened. But I mean, unless that happens, or maybe there's a big dead space because I lost where I was at on my notes or whatever. I mean, like when Ricky was on the show, he had just gotten out of jiu-jitsu class, and I could tell that he was eating. So a couple of times as he was talking, it was kind of like, oh, he's eating a sandwich or something. But that stuff makes it more real and more down to earth. And I like the fact that I'm not a professional journalist. Sometimes I stutter. Sometimes I maybe ask the wrong question, but everybody's always receptive and nice. Like, I want it to sound professional, like the quality of the production, but I don't ever want to be some stuffy journalist interview guy. Like, I want it to just be me and my friends talking about being on tour.
Well, that's awesome, man. I mean, where can people find you online? Where can they find the show?
If you want to follow, well, I'll tell you the show first, because my stuff's a little more boring. It's just pictures of my kids. But If you want to follow us on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter, it's just at TOTOT podcast. So that One Time on Tour podcast, that's my acronym that my wife hates, TOTOT. It just sounds weird.
I think it rolls off the tongue.
I mean, I thought it was kind of catchy and people have enjoyed it. I think my wife just wishes I had something better, but
I like it.
So yeah, anywhere on social media, it's at TOTOT podcast. And if you want to follow me for some reason, if you want to see pictures of my kids and my dog, then you can go to at SwissFTW, SWISSFTW. And that's Facebook. And I always like to have stuff very easy. So I have a personal that covers everything, and I have a podcast that covers everything. So.
Well, that is awesome. Anything else going on that you want to plug or promote? Anything else?
Well, the one cool thing that I've been really jazzed about, and I don't know if everybody else gets as excited, but when it's something you create and you get some recognition, it's pretty cool. We have charted in the top 100 on iTunes for the last 9 weeks.
Oh, nice.
And the next few episodes are pretty insane. And I'll go ahead and, I don't know if it's an exclusive, I haven't really talked about it, but our next episode coming out this week is Brandon Steinekert from Rancid. He used to be in The Used.
Oh, very nice.
And then the week after that is Chris number 2 from Anti-Flag.
Very cool.
And the week after that, one of my personal favorites, Brian Venable, the guitarist for Lucero.
Oh, I love Lucero. That's a really nice. That's really good guest coming up. I'm excited for all those, but Lucero specifically, I think that might be.
They're in Australia right now. We were gonna do the interview a little bit earlier, but I gotta wait on it because they're in Australia. But man, I'm kind of floored at the guests that I have coming up. I've got Ephraim Schultz from Death by Stereo. I've got Murphy from Sugar Ray.
Nice.
I've got Kevin Martin, the lead singer of Candlebox. Like I've opened up the genres. I'm not just strictly staying punk and hardcore. I'm getting some rock stuff. And I mean, I'll tell you right now, the one I'm most excited about, it's coming up in March. I'm gonna have Greg Hetson from Bad Religion and the Circle Jerks.
Oh, that's gonna be really cool. That one's a legend. That one would go in my. I'd be nervous. That guy's a legend.
I'm very nervous. He when Bad Religion was on Warped Tour with us, he gave me a pic one day, and it has him like jumping on one side. I'm gonna post this on the internet at some point when the episode gets closer. But it's got him jumping on one side, and on the other side of the pic it says, "I got this pic from Greg Hetson."
Oh, that is awesome.
So I've got insane guests coming up, and I just if people want to help this show out, there's a couple of different ways. We're on Patreon, but I don't ever beg for money. If people think it's cool, go to Patreon and do it. But if you want to help the show, just subscribe and write a review on iTunes. That's the biggest thing because that helps us out, and people see it if they're looking at another podcast. And so far, that's been our biggest progress that we've had is just people leaving reviews and subscribing because that's what the algorithm on iTunes uses.
Nice. Then, yeah, anyone listening, and definitely go check out that One Time on Tour. I mean, I've said it a couple times now, but you've had a really impressive guests on. I mean, if you like this show, the people he has on that show, I mean, is everyone we play on here, and it is a cool conversation to kind of, it's a little more in-depth, not just a straight interview. It's very conversational and everything. So, yeah, go check out that One Time on Tour, subscribe,
hey, you can also, if you have an iPhone now, I just found out through this beta analytics thing, you can tell Siri to play that One Time on Tour podcast, and it'll pop up and start playing.
Oh, that's badass.
Yeah, you don't even have to type anything.
Oh, yeah, no, people go check that out, and I can't wait to hear the upcoming guests. That's going to be really cool, man.
And you heard it here first on your show, man, because I've not told anybody about those guests. I'm so excited to. I mean, there's more too, but I'm flustered thinking about Greg Hetson. I can't tell you the rest.
That is big. That's a. I mean, Bad Religion and Circle Jerks. Those ones are the ones I'm intimidated the most by. Or not intimidated, but I just go, you're a legend. You've paved the way, basically.
Yeah. Well, and I'll tell you one more that I just remembered, and I want people to not only check out this episode when it comes out, but I want them to go check out this band because they're awesome. They're amazing. Jacob Knoll, who's the son of Bradley Knoll from Sublime. He has a band called Law. It's LAW. They just put out a brand new record, and it's amazing. And he's going to be on the show at the end of March. So. Oh,
that's going to be really cool too.
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's genetics because if you like Sublime, he's got that tone in his voice. He kind of sounds like his dad, but the music is completely different. it's like if you took Queens of the Stone Age, Deftones, and Rise Against, and then maybe a little ska and threw it all together. It's such a good record. You guys need to check that out.
Oh, I've never heard of that. I'll have to check that out, though. I like the comparisons.
Yeah, definitely, man.
But Chris, thanks for calling in today and just kind of talking about your career and that one time on tour. I mean, like I said, great music podcast. Go check that out. So thanks again for calling in, Chris.
Thank you very much, man. I appreciate it. And keep in touch. Let's maybe I'll have you on the show. We could talk about music for now.
Oh, hell yeah, man.
Cool. Yeah, just keep in touch. And thanks, everybody, for listening. And if you like that one time on tour, please let us know. Leave us a review. We'd really love that.